Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage!
Okay, so here I am back. Actually, last night I attempted to film a video, and as you know, I've had music playing in the background coming from my computer, actually. And so the webcam is fairly close by to one of the two speakers that plays the music from the computer. I love these particular set of speakers that I had, or I have. Where did I put it? It's here somewhere. And the problem is lately, though, I was getting a lot of static out of the one speaker that the webcam happens to be sitting right by. And I can't figure out what the static was. There must be some kind of internal connection that's bad. Because it sounds like radio static, but it's only coming through the second speaker. So you have typical PC speakers. You've got one that's got the power switch with the volume on it, and the second speaker is just the speaker part that's attached to the other one. And that second speaker, the one without the volume control, was the one that was having all this static. And it seemed to be getting worse, and I can't figure out what it was from. When I stopped playing music, it was still there, and it was just annoying the crap out of me, and it was coming out on the videos. Well, I can't afford to get another set of PC speakers. So I've dug out a second set I had that I don't know where I got them. I don't know if I bought them or if they came with something that I bought. They're not great, but they'll have to do. I really want to get a decent set of speakers for out here, though. And these are literally the last ones that I have. I went through a lot of PC speakers, and I don't know if they break easy because they're cheaply made or not, but I had at least two other pairs that I don't know where they are. There's only so many places I could have put them. So my guess is that they probably broke and I probably threw them out. So I'm down to one pair now, at least for this computer, for out here. So while I was filming a video last night, I was 20 minutes into the video, and the crackling noise was just bugging the crap out of me, coming from the speaker. And I was trying to play background music, and I'm sure it's being picked up on the video, this crackling. So I attempted to get it to stop while I was filming the video, and accidentally pulled out the wrong USB plug, and I pulled out the plug for the webcam. When you do that, apparently it doesn't save the video up to that point. It completely erased the 20-minute video that I did. So, wait another day, I'm back. So I've been out here, and I've had to change the location of the webcam because the old speakers I had were kind of square and flat, and I could rest the webcam right on top of one of the speakers. It just happened to be the defective speaker. The way the new speakers, or the new set that I'm using, is formulated, I can't rest the webcam on top of it. So the only other place I could put the webcam is all the way above at the top of the monitor, which is a bit high up. So I've got it now looking down. So anyway, I've just really started the second season, the second year of coming out here to the garage to make the videos. After the winter that just wouldn't let go, prevented me from coming out here till sometime in May to start doing my videos. And I had the Terry Riley video going, and it was kind of, it was a big project listening to all my Terry Riley albums again so I could comment on them. And those, took up four videos, over 2 hours long total. And so, you know, it kind of got me away from doing the more casual and things that I like doing out here that I can only do when I film out here. And that is my random vinyl grabs from my vinyl shelf back there. Now, those aren't anywhere near all the vinyls I have. I just kind of replenish it. I've got more in my bedroom, on the floor, and I've got a whole bunch here actually on the shelves in storage bins. I've got several storage bins full of vinyl. So I had actually selected and spoken at random about 3 albums yesterday, and I was just really about ready to end the video when I accidentally pulled the plug and deleted the video. So I put those 3 albums back on the shelf, and I kind of put them in 3 different places so that if I do end up selecting one of them again, it'll be totally by chance. The 3 of them are not stuck together. So, you know, because I'm done with the Terry Riley thing for now, since I don't have any more albums by him, and I've done my classical things, you know, and I still continue to listen to my classical collection. Most of the stuff I showed, I'm still listening to. I'm in a bit of that classical mode, you know, the acoustic mode. I'm still mixing it in with electronic stuff to balance it out, but nothing unusual or unique about that. So I'm going to just do some random vinyl pulls here. So because my video, you know, I lost my video last night after about 20 minutes, I thought I'd make up for it today. So I'm expecting this video to run about 17 to 17 and a half hours. Okay, just so you know. I'm going to do my first vinyl random pull here. Okay, I'll do this one. They're all so tight. Well, I didn't pull this one yesterday for the video that is now gone, but I did pull one by this artist, Eberhard Weber. His very first solo album. How fitting that the first album I choose is his very first solo album. Covered by his late wife, Maja Weber. Recorded December 1973. This is on ECM, naturally. And Eberhard's first as a leader. You know, he had played supporting many folks prior to this. And it's weird. This is now to me, this is, I don't put this at all in his best category. Mainly because the second side is a 20-minute piece, which is just a weird conglomeration of parts put together. But there's a theme that it starts with. The piece is called No Motion Picture. And there's this kind of keyboard and bass guitar riff. And in fact, it's the only place that I believe Eberhard Weber's ever played a standard electric bass guitar on, is this one piece, No Motion Picture. Not through the whole piece, just through this one. There's this one kind of theme that starts the piece off, and it ends, and then it goes into another section he wrote, and then that first theme comes back. But they don't segue into each other. They kind of stop, you know, and it's a bit, I'd say jarring, but it doesn't flow. It is, to me, it's a good piece, but I would like to put all those sections together without that electric bass riff part and see what that sounds like, because the electric bass and the keyboard riff starts, stops, goes into a completely different section that's a bit more typical of Eberhard's composing, and then that section stops, and that fast bass and keyboard riff comes in again. And I don't know, it doesn't seem that compatible to me. You know, it's almost like they were separate tracks on an album, but one of the tracks keeps on getting repeated. And I think that bass and keyboard riff that starts the album appears 3 or 4 times through the course of the piece, and sandwiched in between are these really nice sections. But I don't know, it doesn't flow like a, you know, like a lot of long pieces do that have different movements and sections to them. And but the funny thing is, of all his albums, from people that I've you know, read and spoken to over the years, this is the one album of Eberhard Weber's that they're most likely to have. If they're not like hardcore ECM fans, and they didn't really follow Eberhard's career, it's a bit like, really exactly like John Abercrombie's Timeless album, which was also John Abercrombie's first solo album. I think that's far, far from his best work. And yet that's the one album that everybody seems to know if they have anything by John Abercrombie, and they rate it as one of his highest albums. And if you know John Abercrombie's discography, I don't see how you could think that Timeless is really anything special. And yet, I kind of feel the same to a slightly lesser extent than this. I think, I had, there were times when I didn't listen to this for long stretches, but, and I realized that it was only because of that main bass riff on the second part, to that piece called No Motion Picture, that starts, and then it stops, and then there's that other section, and then the bass riff thing comes in again. Just the way it's broken up, it's very choppy and it doesn't flow. And it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, like, Eberhard's done so many other great albums. So I kind of avoided and stayed away from the album, thinking it was a lesser album. But then I listened to the first side, which is all excellent. There's 3 pieces on there, on the first side, ranging from 5 minutes, 46 seconds to 7 minutes, 45 seconds. And it's Eberhard Weber and his longtime collaborator, Rainier Bruninghaus, on synthesizers and piano, 2 different drummers, not playing simultaneously, alternating tracks, Ack van Rooyen on flugelhorn, who collaborated on Eberhard's last album as well, and the cellos of the Südfunk Symphony Orchestra. A lot of cellos in here, and it's especially on strings. You don't really notice that they're cellos so much as a string section, and they're really effective, and they're mostly on the first side. So it's weird. It's like a cross between, to me, Eberhard always did a couple different types of albums. He did the small jazz band, which was, a jazz group performing things that he wrote, but a lot of improvisation for the musicians in there. And then the quote-unquote compositional albums, where he had any mixture of musicians, sometimes with a string section, in a duo with a piano. A lot of those albums, those compositional albums, don't have drums on them at all. And there's not quite as much, there's very little improvisation on them. And this is kind of an interesting thing between the two of them, the 2 types of albums that he's done. It's got some of the compositional stuff really spread throughout the whole album, even the second side. With the cellos and those parts written out. And a couple of the tracks don't seem to have a whole lot of improvisation. And then there's sections, especially on the second side, that leave a little space for the band. So it's interesting in that it's a combination of kind of the 2 types of albums that he made for a lot of his career. Not counting his solo bass albums, which is like a 3rd type of album that he did. But for most of his recording career, he did these 2 types of albums. These band albums, or these albums like The Following Morning or Fluid Russell that were more compositionally oriented. So, for a lot of people, maybe, not so much, maybe there's a slight, ever so slight rockish flavor on the second side too. Not fusion. It's really hard to say, because I don't think anybody would really listen to this and think rock at all. But I think that electric bass part, actually, the part that I really don't like very much, is the thing that a lot of people do like, and the reason that they like this album. And talking to people over the years, it says, oh man, The Colors of Chloe, I love that album. And it seems to be the only thing that they know about Eberhard Weber. So it seems like, at the time that this came out, around early 1974, I guess the fusion thing was really kind of in full swing, and people were really picking up on any kind of jazz that wasn't necessarily the mainstream stuff, maybe. And so, this I must admit, there was quite a few years I did listen to this, and then it got back in rotation a little bit, especially because the first side is really excellent. A little bit more, slightly more of the compositional stuff, especially the first 2 pieces. The first one called More Colors, and the second one, which is the title track, The Colors of Chloe. Those 2 tracks in particular if I just listened to those on their own, I definitely rank them very, very high in terms of just his compositions. So that's that one. It's funny because yesterday I picked a different Eberhard Weber album out at random. Going back. Where do I go? Oh, now this is weird. I talked about this album, but I spoke about this album, but I don't think... I'm not sure. I might have done this as a random vinyl pull, but I don't. The albums that I pull out for random vinyl pulls, I don't put back in the stack there. I put somewhere else so I don't choose them again. And yet I know I spoke about this in some aspect, Village Music of Bulgaria. Because Carr mentioned that shortly after I showed this on the video, that he was in a store, I think it was a Goodwill store, where they actually were selling a used copy on CD, and this is not something that I even realized came out on CD. This is the None Such Explorer series. Very famous recordings, the whole series, the label and the Explorer series, was very well known for, you know, being amongst the first, at least mass-produced albums in the U.S. Of recordings that went over the world, throughout the world, obscure corners of the world, recording traditional, like, world music, which didn't even have a term back then. When is this recording from? I'm not going to have a lot of luck finding it. You can tell by the design and by the font and everything that, you know, this originally was issued a very long time ago. And they kept it in print without doing a lot of changes to it, which I appreciate. I'm looking for dates. You know, this is kind of strange music. I'm wondering if... see, I thought it may not have ever come out on CD, but Carm said he found a used copy of it at one point. And so it did come out on CD, so this may be something that may even be up on YouTube somewhere. I know when I bought this, I know the store I bought it in because I still have the sticker on it. Once again, it's another record chain that's no longer around. I don't see recording dates for this. And I want to say this is probably recorded in the... probably, I want to guess the early 60s, maybe? Very early 60s? Well, here's an insert. I didn't even realize this was in there. An insert. So let's see if it gets into any of the details. The nice thing about the Explorer series is it goes through a lot of explanation of the music. Because, you know, at the time you didn't have the internet and you couldn't really research this stuff. So instead of just giving you a hunk of vinyl and music to listen to, it kind of gave you a little bit of the background. But in this case, there's some vocal songs on here, so they actually print the lyrics to the vocal songs. But I don't see recording dates. Yeah, so this definitely was not a copy, I don't think, left over from the 60s, because it actually comes in one of these poly bags, which they didn't really do until, when, the late 70s, early 80s? So they were still probably pressing this. And again, I'm looking for a year on the vinyl, but I'm not seeing even a copyright date on there. It's probably there that I can't read it. No, strange, I don't see it. Yeah, my guess was this may have come out in the 50s even. Now, again, with my turntable not working really, or it makes so much noise and only one speaker works that I don't really bother to play vinyl much, I haven't listened to this for ages, but I think the last time I pulled this out and showed it, and I don't know why that was, why I would have shown it if it wasn't for a vinyl pull. I think after the fact, I did go online and find at least some of the music on YouTube or maybe on another site somewhere where you can sample the album. And like I said, it did come out in the CD era, so there were copies around at least until the late 1980s. It's a little strange, you know, I'm not going to lie to you, and there is vocals on it as well, which I don't think I was aware of when I bought it. I know, you know, I guess at the time I bought this, which would have been probably the early to mid 80s, I was well into discovering jazz, mainstream jazz, ECM jazz, and all that stuff. And I think I was looking for something different. I think I wouldn't say oversaturated myself with the ECM type jazz, but I wouldn't have bought this if I, probably didn't have over 100 ECM albums already by this point, and was maybe looking for something outside of my normal listening, as I tended to do. There's a handful of world music albums. I'm talking about the vinyl era still, and classical music albums that I think I would buy just because I had discovered the Eurojazz, the Charlie Marianos and the ECM records and that kind of thing. Got into mainstream jazz after that, and quite a bit, and still, was probably playing so much of it that I went looking for other stuff, which is what drove me to buy albums like this, totally blind buys. Nobody recommended it, or wasn't even on sale or anything. But I remember it's a little strange. It's a little strange. And the only problem, and I'll say I'm not the first person to say this because I read this recently, with the None Such Explorer series, is that, and I guess, mainly because a lot of it's very old, and they tended to, the records don't sound great in general. Why? Because most of them were recorded probably in the 50s or early 60s, and they were recorded on site in these little not in these big professional recording studios, but rather these people traveling to these obscure places and basically capturing these bands playing live in places that normally weren't even recording studios. So they didn't have a structure built for quality of sound, number one. Number two, they're recording ensembles live, often large ensembles. And the third and most important thing is they didn't have big recording consoles and equipment. A lot of times it was handheld stuff, very small recorders. So I think a lot of people would be shocked now if they just started randomly picking up the older None Such Explorer series, that the sound quality isn't that great, mainly because the original recording was probably like a cassette quality recording, wouldn't have been done on cassette, probably would have been done on a small reel deck or something. But, the limited technology of the time, most of those were recorded on portable technology. The fact that the rooms they were recording them in weren't real studios, they were probably performance places. But interesting, and I'm going to go, sometimes I do these videos, and a lot of times after I do the videos when I'm pulling out things that I haven't listened to lately, creating the video actually makes me go and listen to them after the fact. So I am going to go search again, because I'm sure I saw some of the Village Music of Bulgaria on YouTube, because I remember hearing and thinking, wow, yeah, that's pretty strange. Okay, I'm going to do one more. Where do I go? Wow. Okay. More ECM. Jan Garbarek group. This one with Eberhard Weber. So we have a theme almost. March 1983. This was. Jan Garbarek had something called the Jan Garbarek group for quite a while, whose personnel varied pretty much all the time. Different sized quartet, quintet, all musicians coming in and out. And the one constant was pretty much Eberhard Weber was always there, with the exception of one album. But the one album he did not appear on prior to his stroke didn't go under the Jan Garbarek group name, I don't think. It was an album called Places, which didn't have any bass player on it. There's no bass player on that one. And Eberhard had played with him on prior albums called the Jan Garbarek group. And I think Places was just, I could be wrong, I'm pretty sure the Places album that Eberhard Weber does not play on is credited just to Jan Garbarek, but I could be wrong. But eventually Jan Garbarek scaled the band down around 1981 to just a quartet, and kind of established it as a set group of instruments, even though the musicians changed. So around 1980 or 81, he recorded an album called Paths and Prints, which is one of my favorites. by the group, by what fell under the heading of Jan Garbarek Group. And that was a quartet with Jan Garbarek on saxophones and flutes, a guitar player, which was Bill Frisell, bassist Eberhard Weber, and a drummer, which was initially John Christensen. And for the next 3 or 4 albums, he kept a lineup of, the saxophone, guitar, bass, and drums, and didn't, have a keyboard player in there or anything. Even though the musicians changed, the guitar and the drum chairs changed. Eberhard Weber remained, Jan Garbarek remained, and Paz and Prince, which is now I really like a lot, has probably my single favorite piece that Jan Garbarek did if I was just to pick one piece. That album came out. I remember me and my buddy both bought it at the same time. We had just become recent ECM converts within the prior 2 or 3 years. And that was with Bill Frisell, Eberhard Weber, and John Christensen on drums. And so the album comes out, I say about typically at that time in the late 70s, early 80s. The ECM albums would come out in the stores about eight months after they were recorded. It would take to do the cover art and do the pressings and get them out in the shops. That's what I noticed anyway when the new releases would hit the shelves, and I would always look at the recording dates, and I figured out at that time it was about 8 months. So Paz and Prince came out, which me and my buddy both had copies of and we loved, and the Jan Garbarek Group was playing kind of in support of the album, which again, had been recorded 8 or 9, or probably at that point about 10 months prior. Jan Garbarek Group was playing in New York. So we went to New York to see them, and I was finally going to get to see my favorite drummer, John Christensen, as well as Eberhard Weber, which was, I think, the number one reason I was going was to see Eberhard Weber, because he didn't, as far as I knew, he didn't tour in America under his own name or with his own band. I only found out many years later, in recent years, that he did sometimes play in America with Colors, but I didn't know that at the time. And I don't know whether or not he came to New York with Colors, or my area at all. Because I know he played in like San Francisco, but that's the other side of the country. And so Paz and Prince had come out and had been recorded, 10 or 11 months prior. Because it'd been out a couple months when we found out that the group was playing in New York, so we trekked over to New York. My number one reason, like I said, was to see Eberhard Weber play. My number 2 reason was probably see John Christensen play, and my 3rd reason was to see the whole band play. And I liked everybody in the band. I liked Bill Frisell. At that time, I liked. I'm not crazy about his Americana stuff, but I liked what Bill Frisell was doing at the time. And Paz and Prince is a kind of weird album. Like if you're not real familiar with Bill Frisell's style at the time, because the guitar has a very unusual sound to it, which I kind of like, but it does take getting used to. And saw the band play live, and first thing I noticed, John Christensen wasn't there. Mike DePasqua, the great Mike DePasqua, had become the drummer of the group now. And that was the lineup that made this album, March 1983, which again was probably sometime after most certainly was sometime after I saw them. But the lineup had slightly been altered. John Christensen, who may have been playing with Keith Jarrett still at that point, I know he always did a lot of freelancing, was unfortunately out, but I got to see Mike DePasqua, who is one of the few drummers that I ever saw that also plays in that same style. So he's a very fitting replacement, or similar, had a similar musical direction to playing drums. Nice guy as well. Sorry, he passed away just shy of 2 years ago now as I'm filming this. I think it was in August, so as I'm recording this, I think he passed away about 1 year and 10 months ago. And nice guy. I got to talk to him. Actually, he was the only one I really got to speak to out of the band. But the concert was different than the Paz and Prince album, which is a bit more subdued. And out of this period that Jan Garbarek had this quartet with guitar, bass, and drums, even though the musicians changed around, this is probably my least favorite. And it was, and the reason is, this is probably most people would like this one the best. This is much more like a harder-edged fusion album. It was weird because this is what I saw at the concert too. So I was expecting to hear the music a bit more ethereal and laid back, because that was what was on the Paths and Prince album, which was the only album that was out at the time. And kind of after that period, and I don't know if it was during this tour or where it was, Bill Frisell started using some more like distortion devices on the guitar that he hadn't been using prior. And when he played live, I was surprised at like how much distortion and stuff there was on his guitar that he hadn't used previously. He used a lot of processed sounds, but not distortion. He had a fairly interesting, very clean sound to his guitar prior to this. But I was kind of surprised at how fusion-esque his playing was at that time, which was, and they recorded this shortly after, so it's very reflective of the slightly harder edge direction that the band took. Not because the drummers had changed, because Mike DePasqua was very much playing still in that John Christensen mode. And like I said before, best drum solo I ever saw was the night that I saw these guys, Mike DePasqua. It was like a little mini composition. It wasn't a, oh, let me get the guys to clap along, or let me just play faster and faster and faster till everybody's yelling and whooping it up. Or let me see how many rolls around the kit I can do. I'm so sorry that this stuff wasn't recorded. I think there are concerts, I think there's some bootleg concerts up where Mike is the drummer and he has a drum solo, and I want to say, if I knew I was going to pull this out, I probably would have gone searching for it to recommend it to somebody, but I don't know where I found them. But I was very impressed. It was probably the most impressive drum solo because it wasn't like a technique thing. It was more like he was composing, really composing at the moment. And it's weird, and I told him that was a great drum solo. I told him after the gig. And it made me wish that he had done a solo album. I would have loved to hear Mike DePasqua just percussion, an old solo album, and have, let him go. Let him do 45 minutes and see what he can come up with, especially with overdubbing, because I think he had a concept in him. It's so bizarre that he gave up playing, and I know his father had a business for him to move into away from music, but I thought that was really a loss when he stopped playing. But apparently Eberhard Weber was very impressed with Mike DePasqua's playing, as I think I've said before, because once Mike DePasqua came into the group here, into the Jan Garbarek group, and Eberhard Weber was the bass player for the group, Eberhard started using Mike DePasqua on his own solo albums. And in fact, when after Eberhard Weber had his stroke, which was many years after Mike DePasqua retired from playing, and Eberhard Weber had a lot of tapes of solo bass pieces that he decided, since he couldn't play anymore, that he would edit them, these solo pieces, into little miniature compositions, and he could add some minimal keyboard parts to them, which he did. And he asked a couple musicians to contribute to these reworkings of these bass solos. And Jan Garbarek came down at Eberhard's request on one of his later solo albums to record some saxophone parts. And of all the drummers that Eberhard could have called, he actually called and asked Mike DePasqua to come back and do some playing for this post-stroke album that he had put together. Now, Eberhard's in France, living in France, and I think he had for many years. And here's Mike DePasqua here in America, working in the corporate world, and had stopped playing drums. And now Eberhard Weber knew he had stopped playing drums, and yet he apparently thought so much about Mike's playing that he asked him can you come and, just on a few tracks, just do some percussion things again, which meant Mike had to get some practice in and things like that. But obviously, a world apart from America to France, And Eberhard had a lot of musicians in his circle that would have happily, drummers, that would have happily, I think, contributed to that album of his. And yet it was Mike DePasqua was the guy that he called up to ask him to come out of retirement long enough to record some parts, come over here to France. I believe France is where they recorded the drum parts. But I'm not sure, but I'm sure they weren't done in America. So I guess that goes to speak about the strength of not only Mike DePasqua's playing, but how highly Eberhard thinks of him. So this wouldn't be one of the Jan Garber Group ones I would recommend, though. It's weird. It's very it does very much show the concert that I heard, but it's a lot more aggressive. And now I don't know. After this point, Bill Frisell left the group and was replaced by David Torn. So I don't think Bill Frisell's work necessarily stayed in this fusion mode. I don't know if this is the point that he also left ECM and got record contracts outside of ECM and started going in a completely different musical direction from the jazz stuff. And I'm not sure if this is the point yet where he got into the Americana stuff and the rootsy, folky, countryish stuff almost. But I don't ever recall hearing him play on any other recordings that I can think of, including his early ECM solo albums, with this much of a fusion edge to it. And it doesn't really work for me, to be honest. But that's just, I prefer the album that came prior to this, the Paths and Prince album, and the album that came after this with David Torn on guitar, which was really good, called It's Okay to Listen to the Gray Voice, which maybe hopefully one day I'll pull those out and talk about them, because those are two of my favorites of the Jan Garber Group albums. So I've only picked 3 albums here, but I had to just go on my rant about losing my video yesterday, last night that I recorded. So I waited about 24 hours to come back and try it again, and I don't know if you can hear any of the music now with the setup I've got here. It's my stuff I'm playing anyway in the background. So hope everybody's doing well. I'm going to come back with more nonsense, more vinyl pull videos. And I know every once in a while, when people leave comments, they'll ask me a quick question, maybe about something I showed or something like that. And I am happy to answer them. But if anybody has any questions that they would want me to address in a video, maybe because you want a long answer, or you think there might be a long answer to it or so, I'm very open to that. And I don't want to pressure anybody into trying to come up with questions that they don't really have. But and if you have like a short question that you want to ask that you just want me to type back in a comment, that's fine too. But if there's anything you have questions about that you would like to see me talk about or address, maybe in more length than is something that somebody would want to sit and type out, please feel free to ask, and I will be more than happy to address that. It'll give me some subject matter for to talk about in my future videos. Okay, guys, hope everybody's doing well. Summertime is pretty much settling in here. We're in the 80s today, and I know where all my buddies are and spread out throughout various parts of the country, it's actually much warmer than here. And I might make some noise tonight because my upstairs neighbor is away for the weekend. And I know that because he called me and asked me to take in a package that would be delivered to his doorstep. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. I don't know their hours. So, that's what's going on. So, I'll be back soon. In fact, I'll be back much sooner than you want me to be. And hope everybody's doing well. Take care.
Tune in next time for more
Tales from the Garage.